Now for some good news, we're going to have Phil and Peter, the Chief Executive and Group Financial Officers, report item 7, please. Phil and is Peter Gudswell?
Wish we got to that point more quickly than I was expecting. Don't know why. Kia ora koutou. Nice to be with you this morning, Mayor and Councillors. As usual, I'll cover off a few things and hand to Peter. Obviously, Peter will cover the financials, and there is a report elsewhere on the agenda with the quarterly results. Maybe suffice to say at this stage that in my assessment and at a headline level, you should be pleased with where we're at. OPEX is favourable, revenue is favourable, and the capital program is running at 92% completion against budget, with the key projects all progressed. And it's worth noting, just for context, by my calculation, that's $1.5 billion worth of capital work done in the last 2 quarters of council. So quite significant work volumes there. And you'll also note in the report the confirmation of credit ratings, or the 2 credit rating agencies' assessment of us being favourable. So good news. And I might just take a moment also, if I can, to acknowledge Peter and his team, but particularly Peter this morning. I think I would be right, Peter, in saying that this is likely to be your last governing of these set-piece governing body meetings. There'll be obviously other interactions of a budget nature in the new year, but just to pause and acknowledge the fact of Peter's career decision to move on, and to thank him for his being a good colleague and a key contributor to the organisation. So thank you, Peter.
You don't need to look quite so pleased about it being your last one.
I also want to, I'm not going to typically go through staff movements, but it is worth also recording that Paul Amaral has decided to move on from his role in AEM. Of course, Paul started not long before the flood events and has done a power of work to get things in a good shape going forward since those times, after a pretty tumultuous start. So I'd just like to thank him and give some assurance to the governing body that, of course, arrangements that keep us safe and keep things moving along are already well underway. Other matters. Nice segue to the bringing to your attention that an Ombudsman's report was received on the floods and weather events earlier this year. I won't go into any detail. Suffice to say it's available for you to look at. This is looking across the country at those events and effects. Clearly Auckland features, but it's not specifically about Auckland. There are reflections in there for us to consider. They're reasonably consistent with what we already know from the Bush Review and our own internal reviews, but just to make sure you're aware that that is to hand. The Recovery Office will further update you, so again I won't go into any detail, just to maybe acknowledge the significance of the first tranches of categorisations being complete, and the first buyouts now underway. So there's a nice message in that for the affected communities, in the sense of progress being made. Bit of a footprint out at Muriwai in terms of those first offers. So good progress there, and Mace and Matt will talk to you about that later. Other things that sort of are across my desk, and just to make you aware, we always think about our water supply at this time of year, particularly in view of shortages. Some time ago, the dams are 96% full and are being monitored quite carefully. Always the concern is for weather patterns, meaning that it puts pressure on through into the early part of next year and winter, but we're in a good situation in that regard. It's embargoed until tomorrow, but there is, and look out for this tomorrow, but there is a report summarising the economic and other impacts of the FIFA Women's World Cup earlier in the year. I won't comment on that because it's embargoed, but look out for that tomorrow, and it makes for good reading. I'll leave it there. I want to acknowledge that yesterday, with councillors Fully, Turner, Leone and the Mangere o Tahu local board, we signed an agreement with Te Akatai Waiohua out south. It's an important event in terms of the treaty landscape, the understanding with that iwi, and for those who are familiar with that space, it's quite significant in its history and in the importance of that agreement because of the well, not just the significance of that iwi relationship, but its location in the city and the impacts over time on their land in terms of the airport precinct, the Mangere wastewater treatment plant, Pukatutu Island, and such like. So, acknowledging the councillors' support around that yesterday, and it was a really nice event. I won't go into detail. Suffice to say that there are some change processes underway in the organisation. If you have cause to discuss those with me, please do so outside of this forum. There are discussions within the executive team about the refresh that I have underway at a senior manager level in the organisation. That's not something that's going to be concluded this side of Christmas. It's timetabled for some getting final clarity on the nature of the executive team going forward, and is being socialised with the next level, the general manager level, if you like, in the organisation over the coming month. But just be aware of that, because these things, you know, they affect people and they do escalate up to you at times, and let me know if there are any concerns. But at this stage, we've got a really good body of understanding about what I'm doing, and a good level of participation and goodwill from people in that regard. Also, I wanted to signal that the extended program of for graduates, cadets, interns, that sort of the idea of a talent pipeline for the organisation being extended is taking shape. We are looking at 100 of the vacant FTEs in the organisation to kind of supercharge that investment in the talent that we need going forward. Next point to be aware of, on Tuesday we have a pulphery to welcome Eke Panuku into the Albert Street building. So that follows Tātaki Auckland Unlimited relocating into Albert Street. It's the consolidation that forms part of the broader picture in terms of shared services and looking for economies across the group. So you may well not be here, but you're welcome to attend a pulphery welcoming that CCO into the building on Tuesday. Final few highlights, and unashamedly kind of celebrating the positive. Council has just received the prestigious Legacy Award from the World Urban Parks Network, one of the World Urban Parks Top Honours in recognition, quote, of exceptional contribution to urban parks, open space and recreation sector. It's a combo of effort from the Tūpunamonga Authority, certain of the mana whenua relationships in other of our parks and reserves, and other players. We join Melbourne and New York as only the third city in the world to win that accolade.
I want to see that in the Herald.
Simon's typing.
Sorry, apologies.
I think interesting, we also conducted the first citizenship ceremony for the city on a marae out at Huani Waititi. So, you know, that's a nice development in terms of adding a cultural dimension to our citizenship ceremonies. Yes. Yeah.
I think for after the next one's at Watercare, but
Yeah. Shouldn't have. Yeah. Also celebrating the reopening of the West Wave Pool and Leisure Centre, so that was extensively damaged in the flood and storm events earlier in the year, and needed a zhuzh up anyway, but it's back to its former glory and beyond in terms of the quality of the amenity there. So good to have that progressed. Going back a little bit into the park space, the Tūpunamonga Authority won a Parks Green Flag Award, as did a number of other Auckland Council parks. So this is an accreditation or a recognition in terms of the quality of the management of certain parks. So we now have 16 of our parks who have gained that recognition. Most recently, Ambury Regional Park, North Shore Memorial Park, Cemetery and Crematorium, Tautara Park, Arataki Waitakere Ranges Regional Park, and the Mangawhau Tūpunamonga. On Saturday morning, there's the dawn blessing and reopening of Myers Park, so that includes quite a significant piece of work redeveloping that space. And in the following week, you'll be pleased to know, the Mayor will be particularly pleased to know, that Victoria Street West is reopening with the conclusion of those redevelopment works that are pretty visible not far from here. I'll leave it there, but there are a range of other of those city centre developments that are reaching some conclusion really positively. In the regulatory space, I've talked to you previously about the pressure in the animal management space. Just to close the loop, if you like, we're about 2/3 complete now in terms of the additional staffing that we identified to deal with the animal management pressure, the dog volume and risk around biting dogs. So there are 13 additional staff now recruited into that team, and a few more still to go. And in the building consents area, important for you to know in terms of the volumes that have been dealt with, that in the last 2 weeks we've received 1,200 building consent applications. Shows both the ongoing pattern of development volume in the region, but is also a reflection of changes in the legislation that requires consenting around insulation. I'm not sure if Craig's online if you've got questions, but we could follow up later if there are any particular questions. Your Worship, I will leave it there. Suffice to say again that there's a lot of very good things happening, a lot of good progress, and I'm pretty pleased with where things are at overall.
That's very good news. CFO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Phil, your microphone's still on. A very quick update from me. As you'll see from the report, we don't have the monthly financial dashboard ready at this time, or the group results, due to it being an earlier governing body in the month than for normal. So that will be sent out when it is available. However, from yesterday, I can provide some draft and hot off the press indications for council parent, so that you have some understanding of where things are tracking. And it follows on from Phil's closing comments. In actual fact, net direct expenditure, or our surplus result, is comfortably within budget at 465 million. It's 24 mil favourable, so that's the highlight, which we'll look to confirm in the dashboard. Direct revenue remains ahead of budget, and as Phil has indicated, that's mainly due to higher than budgeted processing volumes for things such as building consents, but also inspections, licences and permits. That's 37 mil higher than budget as at the end of November. Some other financial items of note: vested assets, the assets that are given to us, are higher than budget by 100% at 92 million. And DC's, development contributions, they remain unfavourable to budget at this point by 16 million. They're at 96 million, so there's a watch out on that one. With respect to other performance results, we are going to have very shortly the quarterly performance results for the first quarter. It's hard to speak words today, Phil. More coffee required. So we're going to have the first quarter performance results of 23-24 presented shortly after this item. I'll now pass across to Gary.
Morena tātou. The overall picture is one of economic activity continuing to slow as interest rates dampen demand with the aim of reducing annual inflation. The Reserve Bank reviewed the official cash rate 2 weeks ago on the 29th of November, and it held the official cash rate at 5.5%. It's an accompanying statement noted that migration gains have helped to ease the labour market, the tightness in the labour market, which has been supportive of some of those wage pressures being eased. But at the same time, those strong persistent migration gains are adding to overall demand in the economy for goods and services. And so the Reserve Bank's got a forecast for CPI to ease from 5.6% to 5% in the December quarter. We'll know that in early February. And it's indicated that it will continue to hold the official cash rate at 5.5% throughout 2024 until annual inflation reduces below 3%. It notes the risks to that forecast outlook, particularly from those demand pressures. If strong inward migration gains persist, then that demand impact will work against the higher interest rates, which are seeking to dampen demand. And if so, if that risk comes to pass, then a further increase to the official cash rate may be necessary. I'd also note that GDP for the September quarter this year is out at 10:45 this morning. Small quarter-on-quarter growth of 0.3% is expected, so we'll know in a few minutes. It's a backward-looking measure of activity, but the relevance is that if GDP does turn out to be higher than expected, then that would indicate that economic activity is starting from a higher base than had been assumed. And that would have implications for the amount of work that interest rates have to do to dampen activity. And of course the converse holds. If GDP is lower than expected, then it would show that we're a little bit further ahead than we thought. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for that. Is there any questions of these gentlemen? Councillor Turner, please.
Just your comment about the economy constricting a little, but our applications for building consents and things is high. Yeah, how do you equate the two?
Building consents are relatively strong in historic terms. They have come off their peak that we saw in 2021 and 2022, so they have been easing on a downward track, but still relatively high. And it's a bit of a balancing act with those downward pressures. The downward pressure from higher interest rates dampen prices and dampen abilities in terms of assets, and dampen the ability of people to take on projects, the commercial feasibility. But at the same time, pushing against that, we've had quite strong inward migration, which is putting pressure on rental housing stock, and you'd expect some of that to flow through eventually to demand for new housing stock. So there's sort of two factors going on there, but you're right in that the numbers are reasonable, although still trending downward. Thank you.
In response to that, do you check the building supply tradable volumes? Because sometimes you can get an increase in building consents associated with a drop in actual construction. I don't know whether that's the case.
Oh, well, we have just been setting up a new piece of analysis where we're actually trying to monitor the pipeline in terms of when we issue these consents, to what extent projects are started and getting underway, actual construction phase, and then monitoring the completion times for those construction phases to then be able to forecast more accurately the addition to the new housing stock.
I would suggest that, that you keep an eye on, the throughputs at the major building supply companies. There's only about 3 or 4 of them, and that gives you a really good measure of what's going on, actually, as opposed to what's being applied for. Because you sometimes get application rushes ahead of changes in legislation which don't actually transfer to construction activity.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a very good suggestion. We'll be looking into that.
Are there any further questions? Otherwise, I'll step those gentlemen back and make sure that... Oh, have you got a question?
No, just a second.
And see if there's a debate. Moved by the Deputy and seconded by myself that we receive the information provided in the updates. And we'll take this time to thank you for your efforts there. Thank you, Chief Financial Officer. And I wish you all the best. Right, is there any debate? Or in which case I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much. Right, I think, is that you?